Hello everybody, my name is Spencer Walsh. Welcome to today's show. We have a good one for you. It is the morning after a very important night for the Biden campaign, and we have pretty full spectrum coverage of it. We just released our special episode on the UK election. Now we're diving back into what is set to be a full slate show of Democratic politics, reacting to a key string of Biden events, one rally in Wisconsin, and probably more importantly, a big interview with ABC's George Stephanopoulos. We'll have full coverage of that and how the Biden team is dealing with an increasingly restive Democratic Party and really the media going gloves off when it comes to the concerns that a lot of Democrats, including, some Democrats, let's be honest, in the media have had for quite a long time about the debate. We have Biden dismissing calls to resign. We'll give you the full, kind of takeaways from this debate. Maura Healey, Mark Warner, all making, Maura Healey made public comments. Mark Warner has a Washington Post article about him. A lot of very, very important stuff to get to tonight. So, essentially just give some of the general takeaways here. And we start, though, I do want to start, obviously, with the audio, with the clips. That is the important stuff. So, here is how things started off for Biden on this interview. This was apparently pretty early in the interview and how it played out.
Did you ever watch the debate afterwards?
I don't think I did, no.
Well, what I want to get at is, what were you experiencing as you were going through the debate? Did you know how badly it was going?
Yeah, look.
First of all, you're just starting off with the interview, and you can't even conclude. It's a pretty, visceral question. Like, everyone knows how he did in this debate. If he was just, having one bad moment, it was just an episode, not a condition, as, Nancy Pelosi said that Biden needed to prove that it was an episode, not a condition. I think it would have been pretty easy for him here to come out and say, yeah, of course I watched the debate. This is what I thought about it. Or, no, I didn't watch it. I wanted to move past it. It's not reflective of me, whatever. Just like, one firm answer, like when he's dithering like this, when he's going back and forth, even the smallest case, it builds into a perception that, everybody knows is there. And everybody, I think, importantly, and this is how this could really redound pretty badly back on the Democratic Party, they know that they are not being honest with, the voters know that they're being lied to. Like, they really are being lied to, being manipulated, and just not, getting the straight scoop on the president currently of the United States.
The whole way I prepared, nobody's fault, mine. Nobody's fault but mine. I prepared what I usually would do, sitting down, as I did come back with foreign leaders or the National Security Council, for explicit detail. And I realized about partway through that, I get quoted, the New York Times had me down at 10 points before the debate, 9 now, or whatever the hell it is. The fact of the matter is that what I looked at is that he also lied 28 times. The way the debate ran, not my fault, nobody else's fault. No one else's fault.
But it seemed like you were having trouble from the first question in, even before he spoke.
Well, I just had a bad night.
And then he just goes off and stares. It doesn't really give the full justice in an audio medium, obviously, but then he kind of goes off to the classic Biden, freezing stare off into the distance. And also that was just like a pretty just incoherent thing to say. It was like he just got mad about the New York Times for a second, but then he just goes, "No one's fault but mine. No one's fault." But it's like it just is another version of him just kind of losing steam in the middle of the sentence, like, oh. And anyway, that is just the picture perfect clip of, it's not horrifically bad. It's not this clip, which he had earlier today, or even this, I've seen worse clips. And this is something that Joe Stein put out from a rally that Biden had earlier today.
Well, guess what? They're trying to push me out of the race. No! Well, let me say this as clearly as I can. I'm staying in the race. I'll beat Donald Trump. I will beat him again in 2020.
So that was from Jill Stein there. Sorry if the curb music blasted you there, but that was from the lovely Green Party candidate Jill Stein tweeting that out. Had to play that for you because that's another kind of classic Biden clip. There's levels to it, but this is just the average now that we've come to expect from the president of the United States, who's asking for 4 more years in office. And again, this is stuff that I think that Democrats, maybe they're beginning to price in now, but they haven't fully priced in yet, I don't think. And for a long time, they weren't considering about it at all. It's they're going to have to do this whole game for another 4 more years. If he doesn't die, if they're going to have to do this for another 4 more years, just these interviews, it's just holding your breath this, every time he steps out, they'll probably stage manage him even more carefully now, or if he does win, somehow manage to stay on and win. Even in the best case scenario, they're playing hide and seek with the American public with this guy up until, 2028, 2029. That is just horrific to think about. It's just oh my God. This is really an incredibly, incredibly irresponsible thing to do. Here's another clip from the interview.
Let's start with the debate. You and your team have said you had a bad night. But your friend Nancy Pelosi actually framed the question that I think is on the minds of millions of Americans. Was this a bad episode or the sign of a more serious condition?
It was a bad episode. No indication of any serious condition. I was exhausted. I didn't listen to my instincts in terms of preparing, and I had a bad night.
Blaming the staff again.
And I know you've said that before as well, but you came, and you did have a tough month, but you came home from Europe about 11 or 12 days before the debate, spent 6 days in Camp David. Why wasn't that enough rest time, enough recovery time?
Because I was sick. I was feeling terrible. Matter of fact, the docs with me, I asked if they did a COVID test because they were trying to figure out what was wrong. They did a test to see whether or not I had some infection, a virus. I didn't. They just had a really bad cold.
And did you ever watch the debate afterwards?
I don't think I did, no.
Yeah, so then we get to the next part of that clip. But, this is just a very emblematic, part of this, what he's saying right now. This is not going to be enough, I think, for a lot of people, just swing voters and all that, to come in and say, this is somebody who I think has a handle. Because there's a lot of people out there who would, again, as Bill Maher said, would vote for Biden if it was just a head in a jar, because they like the Democratic deep state, the unelected people, the Jeff Zients of the world, the Jake Sullivans of the world running the country, because they just happen to agree with it. But a lot of people would not like that, and a lot of people would like that even less if you made it explicitly clear time and time again on the media multiple times that their country is going to be run by unelected Democratic bureaucrats. That's not something that they're going to like at all whatsoever. And I think I found this one really remarkable. This is him talking about, if he loses, how will he feel?
And if you stay in and Trump is elected and everything you're warning about comes to pass, how will you feel in January?
I feel as long as I gave it my all and I did the goodest job as I know I can do. That's what this is about. Look, George, think of it this way. You've heard me say this before. I think the United States and the world is at an inflection point where the things that happen in the next several years are going to determine what the next 6, 7 decades look like. And who's going to be able to hold NATO together like me? Who's going to be able to be in a position where I'm able to keep the Pacific Basin in a position where we're at least checkmating China now? Who's going to do that? Who has that reach? Who knows all these? We're going to have, I guess, a good way to judge me is you're going to have now the NATO conference here in the United States next week. Come listen. See what they say.
Okay, so there's so much, I think, to within that answer. I think the first, probably most obvious layer here is, and the first thought I had is, there's a really kind of wide-reaching amount of Democrats, and Joe Biden himself, a lot of Democrats have said and I think truly believe that this election is literally an existential threat for our country and our democracy. And if Joe Biden doesn't win this, if the good guys, if the resistance doesn't prevail in Star Wars, the Death Star, mixing my metaphors horribly here, but it could really be a dark day for, we may not have 2028. Trump may take over, etc. Like, that is a very disturbing, and really thought on a lot of Democrats' minds. And to hear him say, you're faced with this scenario, I did the best I could, everyone gets a trophy, we'll all go home happy, left it all out there on the field. Like, that is not the answer that a lot of Democrats want to hear. It's like, of course, he's not going to come out and say, I'm going to commit seppuku or whatever if I lose. But, like, there has to be, I think, from Joe Biden, an acknowledgement that this is a very serious situation, and he could really, I think he knows it in the heart of hearts, but this is not going to help Democrats who say, wait, I thought you were serious about Trump and beating Trump, and you say everything will be okay, it'll all be fine if Trump wins the election. Like, what the heck? And it's just like, I wonder how many people out there are going to buy that and be like, oh, well, we left it all on the field, and all this stuff I was worried about with Trump, that doesn't really matter, because they were so, it's going to be a democracy, fascism is coming, but then this is a real disconnect in terms of that rhetoric. And he struck this chord continuously throughout the interview, essentially saying multiple times that this is going to be about me, this is going to be about my legacy, I have the tools. And even in that part of the interview, that clip, he's like, look at my foreign policy. It's like, most people hate about Biden the most the foreign policy. Like, if you highlight the jobs, highlight the green investment, highlight the really good kind of internal economic moves, support for unions, rhetoric towards taxing the rich, like, that is something that would really say, especially a Democratic base, saying, Trump may be really bad, and this guy's he's done it before. He could continue this economic progressivism streak that he's had going on. Like, this highlighting of, your meetings with NATO and your foreign policy, which has just looked, made America look incredibly weak abroad to the eyes of most voters, is not something that, and we could get into on the political actual merits of it, the policy merits of it, but the political nature of it, how it appears to other people, is that he has been incredibly, incredibly weak throughout the foreign policy. So just, I thought advocating that was insane, but also this really big disconnect about, is this about democracy and the future of the country, or is it not? Because he kept hitting again, I want to protect my legacy. It's about me. It's about making sure I feel good. And I think that was really clear. And if I put out my, give it my all, I'll be fine. It's like, what about all the people that won't be fine under a Trump presidency? All the people that you've been claiming to care about this whole time. And he's admitting that even if he, because of his own arrogance, because of his own legacy, his own impertinence, stays in and costs the Democrats this election, he is admitting that he will be sitting there on Inauguration Day, or even if he shows up on Inauguration Day, he will be sitting there and he will be absolutely fine. He'll be, at least I give it my best shot, mate. Give him my best shot, Jack. And it just fades off into the dust like Yoda the moment it's over. Like, that is, about where we're at the moment. So he really refused to answer questions directly about if he was the same man who took office 3 years ago. He said the last 3 years of hard work have cost him a bad night, a bad run. He immediately pivots to saying, I'm optimistic about the country. He's still saying, come keep my schedule. I'm not frail, man. And while, we are hearing reports about him only being able to have events between 10 and 4 p.m., Biden said he had a full neurological test every day. It's called being president, Jack. But then he admits he has not had a full cognitive test. ABC asked Biden to commit to a cognitive test. He said he took one every day in his job as president. In other words, he said he would not commit. He said he also spoke to Benjamin Netanyahu earlier today, which is a little random. But he has now refused 3 times in that interview to commit to a cognitive test. He said every pollster he talks to says he's in a toss-up, which is delusional, and I think everyone in the Democratic Party knows it's delusional. According to some reports I've been seeing, Maggie Haberman, a lot of people pretty well connected with the Democratic Party, that they are not liking this denialism and delusion. And again, of course, the line that a lot of people are going to be saying is Biden says the only person who cannot convince him to run, or could convince him not to run, against Trump is, quote, the Lord Almighty. Biden points to his crowd size in Wisconsin of why he is going to win. ABC also points out that Trump does. He's been known to draw a big crowd or two in his day. Biden claimed that Democratic discontent over his candidacy is something that he's seen just from the press, and I think that's probably the best time as ever, to get into some of his doubts that have been coming. So shall we say the least? I think it's been up to 4 House Democrats now. We have Maura Healey, but we'll get into that in a second. But I do want to get to this here. As he's highlighting this debate as kind of a bad episode, no indication of any serious condition or anything like that, it really is beginning to show. This is from Politico, Stephen Shepard. The polls are in. President Biden's debate faceplant has put him in his worst electoral shape this election so far. More voters than ever say they have an unfavorable opinion of the president, think he's too old for the job, and want someone else leading the Democratic ticket this fall. It was an incredibly impactful bad episode, I think, that played into a lot of previous bad episodes that kind of make it a serious condition, over the course of this election, which I think is very, very important and relevant to see and relevant to highlight. And really the hits here just keep on coming. No incumbent president has had an approval rating this low at this stage of the election since George H.W. Bush more than 3 decades ago, who obviously went on to loss. And other than Biden's 2024 opponent, former President Donald Trump, no incumbent has trailed this far behind in the horse race polling since Jimmy Carter's re-election bid 44 years ago. So, again, 2 guys, George H.W. Bush and Jimmy Carter, who are very well known for being losers at the end of their time as winter presidents, essentially. The latest numbers have added pressure to the Biden campaign to mount a quick comeback or drop out of the race before his party officially designates a nominee. A string of rigorous but fast-twitch polls show a post-debate slide for Biden, who is already struggling to break out from Trump. 3 of them showed including a New York Times Siena College poll, showed Trump a 6-point lead among likely voters. That would be probably one of the biggest election wins in modern times for Trump if it's 6 points in the popular vote. That just has not happened. Was the Obama margin 6 points? I honestly don't know. Obama, McCain was 7. And then if you go all the way back, they're all within 1 to 4 points. In 2020's Biden win was pretty big. And then Bill Clinton, I would say 1996 winning by 9 points is different because of Ross Perot. But that is a sign, and I think a big indication of exactly how impactful this can really be. It would be a pretty large wipeout, especially in this century. It would be the worst defeat yet for a presidential candidate. It would really change the map into being really pretty tight. 330 plus electoral votes. Each poll differs slightly from the others, including in methodology, but taken together, they paint a bleak portrait. The incumbent president, who has struggled for months to close a persistent polling gap, has now fallen further behind. Already reviled by Republicans, Biden's small drop appears to come from mostly self-identified Democrats and independents. Typically, these would be the easiest voters for Biden to win back, but his broader liabilities have making it difficult. It has not been a seismic drop-off, especially in the national polls, but it's been a pretty important shift. These high-quality polls are the most useful understanding of the current state of the race, and they show a solid Trump lead. The Wall Street Journal hasn't polled since February, but Trump's 6-point lead in the post-debate survey was up from a 2-point advantage in the previous poll. And while Trump's +6 poll was unchanged from his previous survey in April, it underscores that even in the best-case scenario, the debate was a missed opportunity. 5 pollsters who had a pre-debate poll in the month of June have also conducted a survey since the debate, allowing us to understand the debate's effect, and 4 of them show Trump gaining on the margin, but none by more than a 4-point swing. I personally found the most interesting some of the really crazy internal Democratic polls that showed, 2 to 3, again, not small, but 2 to 3 point drops on already pretty significant deficits in all of the key states. So it's going to be very interesting to follow, especially look for those state-by-state polls, and especially look for polls that show the down-ballot Democratic candidates beginning to poll worse, getting more close to Biden in terms of poll numbers, and the gap between them. Biden's clearly been running way behind down-balloters for a while, but if that begins to change and he starts dragging down the down-balloters, it's going to be a bigger and bigger problem. With this tweet here from John Carl, actually a quote from John Carl on ABC, saying there's nothing in this interview that is calming nerves of jittery Democrats. This comes as we're seeing more and more Democrats, including, I thought very interestingly, Maura Healey, urging him to consider dropping out of the race. The Massachusetts governor, a member of Biden's National Campaign Advisory Board, who earlier this spring headlined a big dollar fundraiser for him in Boston, said in a statement on Friday that he should carefully evaluate whether he remains our best hope to defeat Donald Trump. And these statements don't come with, just like they're thrown out of their ass. This is from listening to a lot of people, a lot of leaders among elements of the base, a lot of big money donors, and saying there is a big problem here. And according to this gubernatorial call, which I really found to be quite shocking, as we're seeing like all these tidbits coming out for the weekend, I've been kind of looking at them. I think Michelle Lujan Grisham of New Mexico and Janet Mills of Maine expressed concern to Biden over whether he could still win their blue-leaning states, describing them as competitive. Two of the people with knowledge of the discussion said. In 2020, let's put this in perspective, Biden won New Mexico by 11, in Maine by 9 percentage points. So that would be a big, big deal. It would portend a really generational wipeout for at least Biden. Who knows how it goes on the House level. So Healey, I think, coming out and saying this is an incredibly big deal. She is a high-profile governor in Massachusetts. She's fundraised for him before. She's been pretty broadly supportive, but she's also a pretty smart politician. And, not a particularly, politician who's very ideologically aligned in the battle between the left and the right of the Democratic Party. But I get the sense she is kind of a politician that enjoys getting some stuff done while still playing very much within, the Democratic establishment circles. She's done more than, a lot of Democratic governors out there on affordable housing and some of the, maternity leave policies. She's also done really a lot to challenge some of these suburbs in terms of building trains and expanding the MBTA, which is, their train system there in Boston, in the greater Boston area, and building more affordable housing around those train stations and all that stuff, saying she's pretty legit, and she's not, her saying this means that there are some real people, within the Democratic family of interests, I guess, that have come out to her and said this is a problem. Another really big deal. This guy's a pretty big deal throughout Washington. Powerful, I think, Foreign Relations Committee Chair Mark Warner is attempting to assemble a group of Democratic senators to ask President Biden to exit the presidential race, according to two people familiar with the effort. Warner is telling Democratic senators that Biden can no longer remain in the election in the wake of his debate performance. Warner's spokesperson, Rachel Cohen, neither confirmed nor denied the Senate thinks Biden needs to drop out of the race. Instead, issuing a statement that read, like many other people in Washington and across the country, Senator Warren believes that these are critical days for the president's campaign, and he has made that clear to the White House. So essentially, that is about as good as you're going to get from a practiced Washington politician as a confirmation that this story is actually very, very true. I'm not letting one 90-minute debate wipe out 3.5 years of work. I'm staying in the race. That was Biden's big quote from this afternoon. Biden told reporters he had spoken with at least 20 members of Congress, and they're all telling him to stay in the race. When asked about Warner's concern, Biden said that he was the only one pushing. Oh, now there's just one pushing him for him to step aside. No one else is calling on me to do that. Well, there's also been 4 members of the House, including Lloyd Doggett. He was the first, and then Massachusetts Representative Seth Moulton, two Massachusetts people there, pretty interesting. He told WBUR that it was time to let new leaders rise up and run against Donald Trump. He is a pretty right-wing member of the party, a pretty left-wing member of the party is Raul Grijalva. He said what Biden needed to do is shoulder responsibility for keeping that seat. And part of the responsibility is to get out of the race. I think he's referring to the White House. He said he would support Biden if he decided to continue running, but the questioned whether he could beat Trump in November. Julian Castro has been a big-time, critic of Biden, who has really been exiled and hurt his standing of the party for calling this out back in 2020. Biden should fulfill his promise to be a bridge to the next generation and call for new leadership. And then we have Lloyd Doggett and Tim Ryan also making direct public calls. But the Mark Warner story there is very, very specific. Among the option for his possible planning and his plotting under consideration is a meeting at the White House between senators and Biden. Even if some senators do not want Biden to drop out, advocates for the meeting argue that they could use the forum to air candid concerns in person. Though no sitting Democratic senator has publicly called for Biden to step aside, they privately shared increasing concerns with one another over the past week as they fight to maintain an uphill battle to maintain, their Senate majority. So, with that being said, I do want to get to kind of close it out with this really remarkable story. This is from Olivia Nuzzi in the New Yorker magazine, and it essentially really lays out a pretty comprehensive picture of all these different instances. It just sets the scene at one fundraiser, and a lot of people, put up in there. The White House press secretary, a lot of top donors. He was, in a backyard patio at a private home in suburban New Jersey. The president was eye-to-eye with a small group of Democrats and rich campaign donors, trying to reassure them he was not about to drop dead or drop out of the presidential race. The content of his speech would matter less than his perceived capacity to speak coherently at all, though much of what he said would not be entirely decipherable. His words always had a habit of sliding into rhetorical pileup, an affliction that had worsened in the 4 years since he began running for president for the third time in 2020. He might begin a sentence loud and clear, then midway through sound as if he was trying to recite 2 or 3 lines all at once, his individual words and syllables dissolving into an incoherent gurgle. That is one way of putting it. It's a very accurate way of putting it. He was fine, he told the donors. Old, sure, but fine. He was here, wasn't he? And things were looking pretty good by the numbers. The polls looked good. The money looked good. They're looking right at him. He looked pretty good for 81, no? Really, folks, as he liked to say. What choice did they have? My father always liked to say, Joey, don't compare me to the almighty. Compare me to the alternative. He's just said so many goddamn times. Father probably never said that. In total, his remarks would last for exactly 10 minutes. But as always with the president, the production surrounded on public appearance. Even if it was any public appearance, even if it was semi-private, it came down to timing and control. He cannot spend too much time out in the wild, and the circumstances in which he could exist in such an environment with so many wobbly variables needed to be managed aggressively. According to the rules set by the White House, the traveling protective pool, the rotating group of reporters run by the White House Correspondents Association that trails the sitting president to provide constant coverage of his movements with the press corps, would be permitted limited access to observe his remarks before being whisked away from the reception or wrangled, in communications parlance, and held elsewhere on the property, in a guest house where someone tuned an old television set to Real Time with Bill Maher. Obsessive efforts to control Biden were not a new phenomenon. But whereas the last campaign, the incredible stagecraft surrounding the smallest Biden event, speaking to a few people in a union hall in rural Iowa, say, or in a barn in New Hampshire, seemed to be about avoiding the so-called gaps that for him had become inevitable. The stagecraft of the campaign in 2024 now, though Nuzzi says here, seems to be about something else. The worry is not that Biden will say something overly candid or say something he didn't mean to say, but there will be that he will communicate through his appearance that he is not really there. The display Saturday evening was the last of 7 campaign events held across 4 states in 48 hours that followed the first presidential debate. The events were designed to serve as both proof of life for concerned wealthy patrons of Biden re-election effort and proof of the wisdom of their choices. Other concerned wealthy people were still buying. They didn't need to panic. The sprawling Red Bank estate on a hill overlooking the Navesink River belonged to Goldman Sachs executive turned governor Phil Murphy. The local press had reported that hundreds were expected to attend the event. The $10 million property could have easily accommodated such a crowd. It was more like 50. Fewer if you subtract official staff or members of the Biden family, including the First Lady and several grandchildren. But big money comes in small packs, and Tammy Murphy, the governor's wife, began her remarks with an unusual announcement. The couple had raised $3.7 million with their fundraiser, a number that had exceeded their goal. "This is personal for us," the governor said. "We're with you 1,000%. He called Biden America's comeback kid. The callback to Bill Clinton articulated the nervous, defensive energy that animated the evening. But Biden had not face planted in a pit of bad press because of a mistake in his personal life. His problems would be much trickier to solve. A sex scandal might even help him now, in fact. The president had approached the lectern with his stiff gait, which his office medical report, written by Dr. Kevin O'Connor, who has led his care since he was vice president, attributes to a foot injury and an arthritic spine, which does tend to happen when you're 81. I'd like to make 3 quick points, Biden said. Today we announced since the debate, which wasn't my best debate ever, as Barack points out, we raised $27 million. It has long been a feature of Biden's speeches to refer to the former president in this familiar way. Barack and me, kind of using the association with Barack, a man who's always felt kind of looked down on him as his sense of closeness and his kind of talisman to tie him in with the Democratic base, and kind of a reflection of a return to normalcy, the pre-Trump era when Barack was back in charge. All those large speakers lined the patio, and although the governor and Mrs. Murphy were perfectly audible in their remarks, understanding Biden's speech required intense focus. POTUS was difficult to hear at times. Tyler Pager of the Washington Post assigned to circulate his statements in real time as the President Pooler wrote, so please check the transcript. The pool reporters often struggle with the challenge of how hard it is to hear or make sense of the president. Radio reporters do not always obtain usable audio of his remarks. Print reporters squint and strain and crane their necks, trying to find the best position by which their ears may be able to absorb the vibration of his voice in the air. Reporters scrutinize their audio recordings and read quotes to one another after the fact. Is that what he said? You heard it in that order? Are you sure? Biden continued on. Secondly, I could understand the concern after the debate. I get it. We didn't have a great night, but we're working hard and we're going to be getting it done. Since the debate, the polls show a little movement and have me up a couple of points. The donors, broke into thunderous applause when the president said this false thing about the polls. Early public surveys immediately following the debate said that Biden was down a point or two, but as we talked about, a significant margin, but not, absolutely disastrous by any stretch. But I think the bottom line of this piece is just how many people have talked, have said all this stuff, have worried, and whether it be the pool reporters, whether it be the donors, whether it be the staff members who have been essentially in on this, the fact that Joe Biden was completely not there and just not able to be up to the tasks that, being president requires you to perform on a daily basis. And they said, you know what? It's fine. We're going to keep running with it, and it's going to be all good. And all these people all kind of uniformly afraid. Like, they see a man on fire in Joe Biden, and they just assume that someone else is going to bring in the hose and put the fire out. And that has led to a situation where we are staring down someone who would really, it would not be good if Donald Trump became president again. And Biden is, again, he is the one man standing in the way of that. And the people around him and the people who are kind of the power brokers of the situation have completely fostered a situation where everyone now is going to probably have to live in a Trump world, a newly invigorated Trump world, because of the fact that he has had to, in such a significant way, be pushed across the line and just not be mentally there throughout an entire presidential campaign. All right, that's all we got for you guys today. We are back and better than ever on Monday.